Good afternoon and welcome to our virtual gathering presented by the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. We are the statewide membership-based historic preservation organization. My name is Beverly Thomas, and on behalf of the Preservation Alliance, I am pleased to welcome you to Shaping a New Kitchen to Your Old House with Sue Booth. Today's program is part of our Old House and Barn Expo on the Road series we launched in March as our COVID-safe replacement to our postponed 2020 Expo. We'll continue to offer these virtual sessions throughout the year and plan to include some in-person events later in the summer and fall as well. We always enjoy getting you and other Old House and Barn owners together to share practical information from highly qualified presenters, make connections, offer you a dose of energy and inspiration too. A few housekeeping points I'd like to mention before we get started. I'd like to ask you to please stay muted to keep the background noise to a minimum during the presentation. You may spotlight the speaker by choosing the side-by-side speaker option under the feature view, and also turn your video off to help improve the internet connection. Today's presentation will run about 45 minutes and will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A. I'll wrap up the program by 6, but Sue has agreed to stay on for an additional 15 minutes for those who would like to continue the discussion. Because of our great numbers today, we encourage you to use the chat function for questions, and we'll do our best to address your questions during the Q&A period. And before we close, we'll select 2 lucky winners of our Expo door prizes. And now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker. Sue Booth is the owner and principal designer at Vintage Kitchens in Concord. She got her start designing kitchens in 1985 after becoming inspired by renovating her own bungalow kitchen. Sue has been designing kitchens for 36 years, establishing Vintage Kitchens in 1995, specifically to fulfill her special interest in older houses. She favors a collaborative approach with clients with an emphasis on architectural awareness. Sue feels clients generally know how they want to work in their space, and with her expertise, helps them to design and build their dream kitchens. Sue is an active board member and exceptional ambassador and a supporter of the Preservation Alliance and preservation work. Sue's also a big contributing member to our Expo committee. So at this time, I'm pleased to turn it over to Sue. Thanks for joining us today, Sue.
Thank you so much, Beverly. And I want a special thank you to everyone at the Preservation Alliance for making this Expo on the Road possible this year, and literally bringing the Expo to all of our doorsteps. I think it's been a really wonderful year to date. I also just a quick little thank you for 3 other people for me. My husband, Steve, without whom this slide presentation wouldn't have happened, because while I'm really pretty good with the pencil, I'm really terrible with any kind of technology and photography. So Steve put this slideshow together for me. I'm incredibly grateful to him. I'm also incredibly grateful to Christy. She's our showroom manager here at Vintage Kitchens, and she has been recruited quite willingly as our expert IT person working with Beverly to make sure that you can all see this presentation today. And another shout out to Colleen, who's our draftsman specialist here at Vintage, and making sure that the background isn't too distracting and all is well, so there aren't errand piles of stuff behind you that you can see on our presentation. So with that, I'm going to start talking a little bit about kitchens. Obviously, starting a kitchen renovation can really feel daunting, but there are ways to make this undertaking feel more manageable. The number one bit of advice that I give every client is to make sure you're taking time before you embark on any change. Taking time for planning creates a window of opportunity to reconnect with the things that you love about your home. It also allows you to feel confident about making the changes that you need to create a space that will endure long into the future. I've made a few bullet points here. Well, I haven't, again, thank you, Steve, to help you remember. I love these points for keeping in mind, getting to know your house first. What do you love, don't love? What's the light like in the morning? Are there things that you thought you wouldn't love when you bought the house or you moved into the house that you now find you're just endearing, that you find really endearing? Are there things that you thought would be the be all and end all for you that now you just find you don't want to be keep them? Looking to your own house for design cues, we'll see a lot of examples of this today. Um, I think that is the biggest inspiration, and it is the key cornerstone for how we're going to make a kitchen feel timeless in your home. I also think it's really wise to visit historic properties, historic New England, Canterbury Shaker Village, Strawberry Bank, any local old house museums. They really help you understand the vernacular and give you a better vocabulary of what you're wanting to do. A lot of clients love to collect ideas from books, magazines, and the internet that relate to your style. This is great for overall information, but I really do feel it can be sometimes feel overwhelming and add to confusion. But I never mind when clients bring me their wish list. Today, we're going to look at 6 case studies of projects that we've done, and I can talk about how clients managed to navigate through some of these questions and issues in planning their kitchens. The first case study we refer to as Hilltop Farmhouse. I'm going to show you immediate before and after pictures here, just because we happen to have them in such perfect order. This is an active working farm. The kitchen was put in, a little pine kitchen was put in to service the current residents, along with this pine floor, but they are finding that there isn't enough counter space, the kitchen doesn't give them enough storage, and the pine floor isn't holding up to the rigors of the farm. So here we are in the kitchen looking at our initial plans, and I'll show you the final end result. So this kitchen is fairly simple and straightforward. Some of the things that this client wanted was most importantly, an improved floor. So we put in a porcelain brick tile that looks just like real brick, but is completely easy for them to maintain. And we brought that all the way out to the side door. So coming in from the barnyard, they don't have to worry at all about tracking dirt onto those original pine floors that are in the rest of the house. They really wanted to maintain their kitchen table, and we've given them plenty of space for that. They needed to upgrade their range to accommodate their needs of cooking that they do on the farm. And we wanted a little more counter space, so we just moved the sink to the existing window that had already been installed in the kitchen. There's also some very nice original features in this house. This is the back stairway. You can see some ongoing need for plumbing. I'm sure all of you have come upon that unexpected need to remodel a bathroom or replace some plumbing in your home. And so we're seeing the aftermath of that old pipe, and they wanted me to leave that there, but make it somewhat invisible. They wanted to feature this back wall and keep as many original features as possible. So here is our end result, which I think is really quite lovely. We just built out the wall and a little bit of softening for the pipes to hide behind, keeping the solution very simple. I love how the back stairwell is now very visible and really becomes a feature when the minute you walk into the kitchen, that's where your eye goes. This just shows a little slide showing the fireplace and just how important this little gathering spot is to them all the time, but particularly in the winter. And we wanted to, and so I wanted to show you that in the next slide, what I did was I hid the microwave in this little cabinet. They wanted a little place to store a microwave, but they didn't use it all that often. And this proved for them to be a good solution. Again, we went through many iterations of solutions on where to put some of these small appliances and microwaves. And when we fell on this last one, it was a winner for sure. In the next case study, we're going to move on and look at a house that provided amazing amounts of inspiration for us. We call this project our Pantry Inspiration Project. This house had 2 beautiful intact pantries, this being the food pantry. The next slide showing the butler's pantry that led to the dining room. I will orient you in some future slides to these 2 pantries, but these were just incredibly intact and gave us great foundations for moving forward with our kitchen renovation. I love when you're able to embrace original features in any manner that makes sense for your project. So in this slide, you see the two pantries. That's the butler's pantry on the left. This is the kitchen pantry on the right. You see the remnants of an earlier renovation. And you also are seeing two pieces of furniture that this client had and really wanted to incorporate into the new kitchen. We moved this Hoosier around many places and ultimately decided that that location was perfect. At the time that this photo was taken, we didn't know that that would be our solution. The other piece of furniture that you'll see again is this bureau. Client loves the marble top, and the height was slightly higher, making it a really comfortable workspace for her. Just another reminder about details. Details can be the overall look of a door, but even just a molding, a little detail or curve at the bottom can be sometimes a nice springboard for us to make some sensitive decisions when we're planning a new kitchen. I also love when someone either wants to incorporate salvage as well as favorite pieces of furniture. This sink was in pretty great condition. It did need to get resealed and waterproof, but you will see it in its final resting spot in the new kitchen, and it was just a delight. It was quite a nice find. If you can't find a sink, they are fairly straightforward to make, so we can have them made to match as well. This was the sink view, the old sink view, obviously. When the kitchen had been remodeled, someone did replace the original windows, and they made some what they felt were aesthetically sensitive decisions. They framed the window in existing trim. They used a wood top, which wasn't a shiny or plastic laminate top. So while they made some good decisions, the space just wasn't working anymore, and it just really didn't fit this gorgeous early 20th century house. So we made note of that and how we wanted to change that. The other feature that they really wanted to incorporate here was this beautiful range. She uses this range all the time. I really wanted to see it highlighted, as did they, and she really wanted a space that was designated just for it. And you can see this, here's the butler's pantry and the glimpse of the dining room. This is far less desirable transition, so we wanted to change this corner and make it a little more appealing. The refrigerator had been tucked into what I believe was a closet or an old stairway. I don't remember which it was. This is a bathroom behind, and there had been either chimney or old piping that was in this wall. So it gave us the inspiration to think about maybe we could change this wall in a bigger way than what you're seeing here. So here's the beginnings of the end result. After many different go-rounds and cogitations on plans, this is how we settled. We did expand the existing refrigerator space and made an alcove for that beautiful range. There's that bureau, that favorite bureau for the client that we put front and center in the kitchen. It seemed like the perfect spot for it. It didn't feel the need to move it. And here's that antique sink that we had refurbished and re-oiled. Clients also made a decision to change the windows. They had been changed in the earlier renovation. They added new windows that were more sensitive and more in keeping with the rest of the house. So these 6/1s are match other double hungs throughout the house. I love this shot because I really feel like it shows the attention to detail that both the client and I had, and the fun we had trying to integrate this kitchen into those pantries. You see the door style that we used here very much imitates and complements the butler's pantry doors. There was beadboard elsewhere in the house, and we incorporated little touches of it around, but didn't want to overwhelm because it wasn't a principal design element. But the client did love it. So I think that we've created a quite lovely sink area for them. The stove alcove I just adore. They've used tile in a very typical running bond pattern, nice and easy to take care of. The stove is now well ventilated, and the height of the alcove was designed to be comfortable for both husband and wife when they were at this stove. This is the former microwave and toaster oven spot, and I think a much more friendly transition from the kitchen through the butler's pantry, which you see right there, into the dining room, and a great place to showcase the amazing pottery that this client has. So on we go to the next case study. We're going to look at an 1830s brick federal. This poor house, it's a beautiful, beautiful house, but it had been through many challenges. It was expanded quite wonderfully, and this photo shows the first expansion. The little white addition back here used to be a small cape. In the hurricane of 1938, I believe, the outbuildings were destroyed, and all the windows and this porch were completely obliterated in the house. So the house was restored. The main brick part of the house was restored, and this L addition was restored. Our kitchen takes this corner of the house and that window right there. The fun part for me about this kitchen is that both my husband and my late father-in-law remodeled this kitchen. So I feel like there's a little family tie to this house. This is the kitchen as it was before my father-in-law renovated. This was a renovation that had been done in 1950. You see the washing machine, the metal cabinetry with the sink, and then a little hint of the range there. I love this photo because it does speak to how people use this kitchen. So there's a chair at the hearth, the table, so it's very much a gathering space. And even when we look at the next slide, which is the 1970s renovation done by my father-in-law's crew, you can see that the table was still maintained. The client replaced just an open fireplace with a wood stove, and the sink stayed in its current location, the oven in its current location, the heat in the current location. I believe that a bathroom was either added or renovated, and a pipe chase was added, which is what you see here. So this is how I saw the kitchen when I came into it, and the client had some changes they wanted to make. So this is the newest rendition of this kitchen. We maintained the antique heart pine floors that were throughout the house, just beautiful. They wanted to keep their wood stove. They decided they were tired of a table. They wanted a little extra working space that they could also sit at in the morning. And they wanted to try to open the dining room, which had amazing views, in toward the kitchen a little more, so that they would be inclined to sit there for most of their meals. We covered up the radiator, but made an open grate at the top and at the front. I did move the cooktop over to this side of the window, and the sink here to give them a little bit more central feel with that sink. This tall cabinet houses piping behind it. It's easily accessible from inside the cabinet, but you also can see that we've done a good job of disguising that for them while giving them a very useful cabinet. All of this took some time and multiple iterations before we settled on this final idea. This was the before view into the dining room. Where the refrigerator is, I put a little step back cupboard with an oven and some pantry storage. And this part of the kitchen you will see will become a fairly large opening into the dining room. That change really changed how these people live in this half of the house, and feedback has been that they are in the dining room all the time now. This is the view from the dining room, and I think the kitchen archway was a very sympathetic addition based on other archways around the house. I think the view into the kitchen is quite pleasing. Sorry, I am not very good with this kind of stuff. And I just was really delighted. To me, a very simple renovation, but really accomplished many things to integrate the kitchen into the whole of this beautiful home. All right, since I already gave you a jump start on this slide, I love this case study. This and also this little painting. This was a Christmas card from our client of their house that he painted. Just a beautiful little cape. And we were asked to help them not make major changes, but to update and improve the kitchen. When I went to see the kitchen, I wasn't quite sure what was desired. The clients were very clear about the things they did cherish in this space. So the kitchen, they are new to this house. The kitchen was probably renovated in the 60s, and it was really lovingly built. The cabinetry was very lovingly built to be in keeping with this sweet old farmhouse. But the current clients who love to cook were finding the lack of counter space quite daunting. This you can barely see it, but this was built to look like a dry sink, and it had a recessed countertop. So that area just became very difficult for them for working. Other things that they loved the tone of the cabinetry. They felt like it blended in with the rest of the house. They were not fond of the new pine floor that had been put in. It was really took an incredible amount of abuse and had not held up well compared to the original boards that were in this other part of the house. So they really wanted to consider a different floor. While they wanted to improve the storage in this cabinet that we see here, they really loved this little divide between the entry hall, which is what this is. This is how you came in by the porch door. You'd come into this space and either go to the old house over here or come this way toward my arrow and go to the dining room and the library. They really loved that you got a glimpse of the kitchen, but you didn't have to see the dishes and all the goings on in the kitchen from the front door or from the porch door. In process, I love to show this slide because it does show these cabinets were built on the wall in place. So they were an amazing runway for mice. I think that, hopefully I'm not exaggerating, but I think the number of mice in the 2 or 3 years that the clients had lived there, the count was about 635 mice. They do wish they had a better mouser, but they have a pretty wonderful kitty. She just didn't really like to be a mouser. So part of the whole process of this renovation would be to try to help mitigate some of those most raceways that this all built all in one piece kind of cabinetry is just prone to. We did keep the original, the vent that was been put in the 60s. We just added better parts to it and updated them and made them a little more weather tight after going around with many different options for ventilation. So this is the new kitchen. The clients have made choices that the wood color of the cabinetry very much like what was there before and very much complementing the beams. Very simple. We kept things very simple. They did replace the windows with more energy efficient windows since they had been already replaced in the 60s. And they chose a grill layout that was very much in keeping with the rest of the house. There you see an updated version of their little privacy divide. And all of the materials that we used were very subtle and low key. We replaced the pine boards with some brick that would be more durable for them. And I love this slide because, for instance, the client finally could find a home and repurpose a light fixture they had brought from their time abroad when they lived and had that light fixture specialty made for them. Some artwork that they hold dear. So I just really love how they were able to make very simple changes that really gave new life to this beautiful old kitchen. We changed the heights a little bit. I think changing depths and heights add a little bit of interest when you have this very long line of cabinetry. I think it's a very simple and subtle way to introduce a change. And we improved some of the storage, making it a little bit more functional for the way they use the space. Our next case study brings us to a beautiful colonial revival. Again, a house that gives us many, many cues for how we're going to redo this kitchen. We just love that entry shot. I mean, everywhere you turn in this house, there's just spectacular woodwork and millwork. The first challenge that we had was what to do with this old bathroom. This bathroom was probably where we had thought at the time where a previous scullery or pantry had been. Someone in the, I'm going to judge, maybe in the 60s, maybe the 70s, had put in this bathtub and given themselves a full bath on the first floor for their convenience. But now it was time for this to be reclaimed as part of the kitchen. This is an existing butler's pantry in this house, and the form that you see here was one that we used when thinking about the scullery. There's a little pass-through here that was closed off, but will be reopened as the bathroom's removed and the scullery is refounded. So here is the scullery. The bathroom's been removed. You can see the new kitchen through the window, through this doorway, and I will explain the location of this room when we get to the next slide. The built-in materials that you see here had been removed and put into the basement. The basement's not the greatest place because of moisture for these things, so there had been some damage, but we were really grateful to find them, and they really started off the whole aesthetic decision about how to rebuild this scullery. So this bit of cabinetry, you can see, very much is in line with this bit of cabinetry. This in quarter sawn white oak, much more high style at the time, and this in yellow pine and a much more serviceable kind of casework, but the layout very much the same. That gave the carpenter the information they needed to rebuild this section. So we really thought a lot about the form before we had these built, where this is where the tub was, and the selection of fir was a really nice complement. The addition of the scullery gave them a place for a larger thermal oven. You'll see a beautiful reclaimed and refurbished range from the 40s, I believe, in the kitchen. And they also did not want the microwave in the kitchen, but wanted to have it accessible. So it gave them a little spot to just tuck it on the corner and change it out whenever they wanted to. So the kitchen itself was also a relic of the past. One of those times where you see the renovation, a previous renovation, and really needing to decide how you want to orient the kitchen. I often don't take all my cues from how things are laid out now. There's a lot of interview, there's a lot of drawings, and what if we do this, and what if we look at that, and how, should the sink stay here, should the sink move, what are your lists of most important needs and wants, especially when we're doing an early 20th century kitchen like this that has a very big open room with lots of doors. So off where that dark doorway is, that's the former bathroom and the current scullery. When you look at the after pictures, this will be where we end up putting the stove. The laundry is through here, and this section of the wall the clients did decide to open up. It's a beautiful access to their backyard, and just a really nice transition space for them. That will not be in the after photos. So the biggest challenge, and the one that took us the longest time, was how do we deal with this long wall that we have with these doors and the windows. I'm going to show you two slides, this being the western side of one wall, this being the eastern side of that wall. This was how you came into the kitchen, and it really wasn't desirable for the homeowners. They were going to take down this makeshift enclosure and bring back the original porch entry that was here. And they really weren't fond of coming in to the kitchen this way. But I will say that that took us several design iterations before we came to that conclusion. I don't remember who had the idea of rethinking the work pattern, but as a team, we came up with the idea of reworking how you came into this house from the porch. So this window that was in the butler's pantry that you saw earlier, you will see in the new kitchen became the entrance. So we moved that very door to that window location. Doing that really changed how we move into the kitchen and how you move into the house. It was kind of a brilliant idea that only can come sometimes, I think, from great teamwork. This window did get removed. You will see the new one in the next slide. There is the renovated kitchen. But before we just absently took out that window, there was a lot of discussion about what it should look like. And the third floor of this house, on this side of the house, you see the first, second, and third floors. And on the third floor, there were a pair of double hungs that were very much like in keeping with this. They were in the attic, in a living space in the attic. We decided that perhaps by bringing those down to the first floor, when they opened up the porch area, it would really tie things together. And for me, it was a real boon in terms of how to make this kitchen both simple and very functional. So the refrigerator is where the door was. We've now relocated that door here. We took cues from both the butler's pantry, which is opposite this door, and the scullery, which is through this door over here, and used that casework cues as the inspiration for this storage cupboard. This is a little pantry and dish storage for them. They added copper countertops to keep the countertops quiet here, little soapstone next to the stove. So you don't have to have everything the same. They did a painted wood top here because it wasn't going to be a workspace. Some key drawers so that this little part of this kitchen will function as its own very nice kitchen. The dishwasher and the big sink are in the scullery. So for the two of them, when they're just alone, this kitchen set services them quite nicely. They can sit at the table. There's a little desk space behind this chair that leads out, that gives them a nice little home office space. And that beautiful refurbished range is just the coolest thing in the whole world. So overall, just a really, really lovely solution, and flows beautifully now with the rest of the house. Our last case study today will be one that I feel very fortunate to have been part of. I have very rarely worked on a kitchen where we have original blueprints to the level of detail that they have for this house. So this was a little cottage designed for a single woman by Peabody and Stearns architects from out of Boston in Newport, New Hampshire. And the bulk of the house had most of its original features intact except the kitchen. The kitchen had been renovated in the 1950s with a dishwasher added at some point after that. I don't really know when. And it just was a major disconnect between all of the beautiful details that we found everywhere else in this house. And the key was, how are we going to bring that back? So things that the clients were adamant about were understandably keeping all original doors and windows. Getting a little more room around the sink would be ideal. This client owned a restaurant and was a hobbyist cook when he wasn't working. So the kitchen just was not functioning for him at all. And his partner couldn't be in the kitchen. It wasn't connected to anything, any other part of the house. So they really wanted a more community and larger family focused space. There is a wall that we see right here that we did debate long and hard before the ultimate decision was to take that down. It adjoins a 4-season sunroom, and you'll see that later. Those kinds of decisions don't come quickly. I think they really need to be thought of fully, and we usually have multiple ideas to try on, and after many work sessions, often we'll come through with one that feels just right. Obviously, the refrigerator location wasn't working. You can see those beautiful windows that they had. The microwave had kind of fallen off the wall, so it was just tucked on top of the fridge, which was anything but convenient. And the range was not a range that this professional chef wanted in his home kitchen. So how do we get him a good, hardworking stove and get that fridge out of the way of those windows? That was a good challenge. On my second visit there, they showed me these incredible set of blueprints they had. I had come with some sketches, including the idea of some kind of cupboard by the back door, which is right here. And when I saw these blueprints, I knew that we were really onto something, and we really needed to pursue this in a way that would be guided even more fully by these blueprints. At that same meeting, I walked around the house with them, and there were lots and lots of built-ins, so we were able to use these actual built-ins as a mock-up, and we built our cabinets for them for the kitchen, very much in style of this. So the styling on the cabinetry, from what we call the framing bead, which is this detail right here, to the width of the framing, all was informed by the original built-ins. More blueprints showing a very similar floor plan to what we ended up with. I just loved having these as detail. When we were looking for moldings and we were looking for brackets to support the upper wall cabinet of the hutch and the seating area that they were requesting, they showed us the house had 5 fireplaces with gorgeous mantles. So we walked around every single one of them and looked at all the details. My husband put up some graph paper so we would have some kind of reference of scale with our photographs, and we could see the moldings. This beaded cove is one that we use all the time. Steve had a cutter made when he was doing an older house in Chester, and we have used it multiple times. It was fun to see it here in this early 20th century cottage. Another bracket, every fireplace had a different design and different bracketing. And after we walked all around, the clients said, well, there is one mantle that wasn't used. We have the details, and we kind of love the idea of maybe using this bracket detail as our detail in the kitchen, since this was the only one that wasn't already in the house. So that's what we did. We drew them, and our shop made the brackets to very much match what you saw in the blueprints. It really felt like such a beautiful decision for them. So you see those brackets here on the new seating space that they now have to be connected to the cook in the kitchen. And you also see them on the side of the wall cabinet here. The other thing I like about this photo is that it shows the changes that were made. It's very obvious to me that there was a change made architecturally here, but the decision was to keep the old sun porch ceiling and to keep the tin and add in this softening that would help us with some repairs. That the tin needed some repair work and had suffered some damage over the years, and adding in this soffit was a very quiet way of transitioning, allowing some wiring, covering up some plumbing from the upstairs bathroom, and repairing the ceiling so that just the best of that tin showed. We also moved the sink into this peninsula and away from that window. So now that window is just a beautiful workspace, and the sink looks out over their gardens. This is the hutch, very similar to the one that we saw in the original blueprints. I just adore the way this sits there so nicely with added features. We changed the bases, added well-functioning drawer slides and shelves that roll out, and all the accessory things that make a kitchen more functional. But we did it in such a way that it still is very much in keeping with the old house. So this is the cooking hearth. The refrigerator, they did find a closet extended into the kitchen when they were doing demolition. So we were able to really push that refrigerator way back into that closet. The closet was 6 or 7 feet deep, and now it's 2 feet less than that, but still quite a spacious for their needs. And it allowed us to finally give that refrigerator a home and unencumber that beautiful window. The client has the professional range that he wants, and the venting was really easy to accomplish right out the house in a way that was somewhat discreet. the view, I like this view from the sink because you can see that they really were able to capture their goal of being connected and yet still feeling very much like the house was in keeping with the rest of the beautiful intact property. People always ask me about stainless steel appliances and should you use them? And I really am of the opinion that, this is a working room. And I think that if for you, stainless is the thing that makes it easy, then you should do that. If paneling your appliances so you don't see them makes you feel better about how the space looks, then that should be what you do. I think keeping an open mind about finish choices for modern appliances is one thing that I think is just paramount. I do think that matching other finishes, like there is antique brass, there's unlacquered brass everywhere in that house. So that was their choice for the hardware. And the wood here was a little lighter than the other woods that were stained in the rest of the house, but very complementary. So overall, just I think a really nice integration. And that's the last of it.
Okay, thank you so much, Sue. 6 incredible case studies. You have such a knack for connecting with the client, knowing what they want, what they need, listening to them. I know people must have questions. Nobody has put anything into the chat, so I'll start the chat. I'll start the questions, but please feel free to put some questions into the chat so we can continue the discussion here. One of the participants actually sent some questions in advance, so I will ask those. And the first one was how to incorporate modern stainless steel, and Sue addressed that very well. One thing, Sue, can you touch on if people really don't want to see them, how they can hide them?
Sure.
Like a dishwasher, for example.
Sure. If you don't want to see the dishwasher, nowadays it's really pretty easy. Dishwashers can come what's called fully integrated, where you can get a panel that matches the cabinetry. I also think that if you make a choice of a black or that what's now called black stainless, it's less bright and shiny than the stainless is, and sometimes that by itself can feel like a good solution. But if you really don't want to see them, you put wood paneling or paneling that matches the cabinetry on the front of the dishwasher. A little more specific with the refrigerator, and the range, obviously we don't ever panel those. We might panel the hood, and we saw ways that we hide the hood.
Okay, great. One other question. Well, people are all commenting on the mice. Yes, 600 mice is definitely a lot of mice. And that's sort of part of old house living. But it was interesting, Sue, what you said, how often cabinets built in place are less, what's the word? Mouse friendly, more mouse friendly than if they're.
So even though, so cabinetry can be built, you can do really long runs of cabinetry in one piece so that it still looks built in, but they have full partitions between each section. They have tops on them that don't allow anything to fall into them, what we call dust covers. I call them mouse covers. They have full backs, they have full floors. So the casework box is fairly discreet. It probably won't stop a really adventuresome mouse, but it really does help, because when you build on site and you make the back wall of the kitchen, the back wall of the cabinetry, you just end up getting spots where you have little holes, and mice really can run around pretty fully. So when we had it all out, we plugged up holes and did the things that we could to minimize it. But yeah, it was a pretty amazing number, and it grew every time I was there.
Yeah. Okay, I'm getting lots of questions about your contact information. I just want to let everybody know that I will be sending a follow-up email tomorrow, and Sue's contact information will be in there. And Sue's probably going to get a lot of emails, so give her a few days to get back to you. She's a very busy woman. And someone's asking, Sue, if you will they just purchased a condo in a mill building, and the cabinets are great, but she's interested in putting a new countertop and maybe some subway tile as backsplash. And there's just so many choices out there. She's asking about hourly consultation, but I just want to broaden the question, like, how do you even begin to pick out something? Do you
Yeah.
start with a color, a design, of what?
Well, I think that you start with something, whether it's if you have cabinetry and you love the color, then you start to think about that. The flooring itself if it's an original old floor, that might spark a direction that you go in. When I'm looking at counter materials, I feel like there are many that are great out on the marketplace, but I really look at the ones that are going to last a long time and that are repairable, that are user friendly. And you also need to decide whether the qualities that a particular material, be it a cabinet finish or a countertop or flooring, the qualities that they bring, are they the qualities that you can live with? You know, it's kind of like you're picking an inanimate partner for a long time. So my preference is generally some sort of stone, because I feel it's repairable and easy, or wood on occasion, depending on where it is. There are many engineered materials out there nowadays that, for me, I'm watching that market. I use some of them. People might know them as quartz, but there are man-made composite material. They're not as repairable. Usually, I just more judicious about where we use them. We might use them more in bathrooms than we might in kitchens. I'm a big fan of soapstone. I use it. I have clients who use it a lot. I also really love non-shiny or honed surfaces whenever we can do them. So if you're starting, I think you really just start looking, if you want to think about counters, you really find the one that works for you and that you feel complements the house. And in terms of the tile, I would always pick your countertop first before you pick your tile.
And how about backsplash tile versus beadboard or something? What are the pros and cons there?
Well, I think you decide. So in this kitchen, for instance, we didn't put beadboard right behind the sink. We put a slab of soapstone because water is just, we know that we'll be back for repair around the sink whenever we have water. So I don't mind mixing things up. In this case, they wanted a very uniform and unified look. So we just interrupted it with soapstone behind the sink, and that's where the bulk of the water is. So long as you either knowingly make that decision that it's something that might require maintenance, which is then completely fine in my mind, or you decide that that's not acceptable for you and you find either a stone or tile that solves that problem for you.
And relating to that, there's a question, they're renovating their 1860s kitchen. Suggestions for appropriate backsplash. So would you recommend, in terms of appropriateness, tile or wood, or does it not matter?
I think it depends on the design that you end up with.
Okay.
I don't want to dodge the question, but I tend to look at kitchens in terms of layers. So I look at the actual form and flow of the space first, and then we might layer on the biggest decision, which would be probably cabinetry and those finishes, countertops and those finishes. And then it really becomes apparent what you should do on the backsplash. When I first started with the kitchen that's on the screen, I wouldn't have told you that that was the solution that I would have come up with the client. I really feel like a good impervious surface is critical behind a stove, unless you're completely okay. Again, I always will use that caveat. If someone is really okay with just having painted plaster, I'm not going to convince them otherwise. We'll talk about the pros and cons of that. Think about your comfort level with scrubbing or grout, or you'll always have some maintenance, and you have to decide what maintenance is the most practical for you. And that's how we usually will decide that.
Okay.
I think that taking that kind of time, and if you layer your decision-making process in the planning stages, sometimes an idea that you might have rejected outright initially becomes one that you really embrace because it makes so much sense when you get to a certain point. Or sometimes you might come in and say, I always want to have this, or I never want to have that because, and you have a very valid reason for it. But as you're planning, you discover like, oh, maybe there is a good reason for doing this, that, or the other thing. You know, maybe a wood floor is better in this space because. So I think by layering your decisions and not trying to solve them all at the same time, by identifying in each area, be it countertops or backsplash or cabinetry, what you love and don't love, I think that those decisions, they really do sort out.
Okay, great. Here's one relating to lighting. How would you determine lighting for a 220-year-old summer kitchen in a Cape where the ceiling is open to the roof boards and purlins and the beams cross below the roof boards? So open frame.
Yeah. So I think that one of the advantages we have now that we didn't have even 5 or 10 years ago is the how beautifully discreet LED lighting can be. If you have wall cabinetry, putting a strip of LED lighting under your wall cabinetry will light this counter. You know, it's great task light and it's somewhat invisible. It really doesn't make an aesthetic impact other than when it's on and it gives you a warm glow, and obviously a delight to work in a kitchen that has a lit counter. I'm also a big fan of just really simple chandeliers or pendant lights for general room light. So you kind of layer the lighting. You have sort of general light that adds a bit of brightness, but I don't mean like, you know, sunshine brightness. It just adds light to the room. And then you very specifically plan whether it's a wall sconce or an armed wall sconce that comes off the wall, or under cabinet lighting that is very discreet. You can even put that in a shelf these days and not see it. So it is incredibly versatile and tiny. So you layer your lighting so you have task lighting where you need it most. You have some general light, and you might have things like wall sconces for ambient light that kind of balance things out.
Okay, great. Recommendations for antique or salvage materials, sources for such.
I think that we have some on our directory. Do we not have some good salvage places on our directory, Beverly, from the Preservation Alliance?
Yeah, I'm not sure there are any salvage places. Norrie Salvage,
Yeah,
Southampton, New Hampshire.
that Northeast Architectural Salvage is great. I've had clients find sinks and old floorboards even on Craigslist or eBay Marketplace. If someone's taking things out, they might put that on some of the most unlikely places, but they have found some pretty wonderful sources for that kind of thing. If you're looking for a particular wood, even going to a local wood supplier like Goose Bay Lumber here in the Concord area, they might be able to set you up with someone who deals with antique wood if that's preferable, or they might find some old stock for you. So I would look in the typical salvage places, antique markets, flea markets. Northeast Architectural Salvage is the biggest one here. Vermont Salvage, I think, are they still in St. Johnsbury? And then I would look in those unusual places like Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Etsy, Craigslist for some interesting finds.
Okay, thank you. And here's a comment that I find interesting because it's not true with mine. She says, beware that soapstone farmhouse sinks don't drain the best. I have not had that issue with mine. Mine has no problem. Have you had that problem, Sue?
I haven't had that problem. I think that stone sinks, again, for me, part of this whole thing about clients making decisions is about that education. So if you have a soapstone that has a lot of quartz, it might have some high spots in the floor. The floor of the sink should be sloped to the drain. If it's a newly made sink, it will be sloped to the drain. You might have some high spots that need a little attention, but usually that can be taken care of. They're never going to drain quite like a stainless steel sink that's designed to do that, but I often will tell a client that a little squeegee might get the water moving up and over that little like quartz vein if you have that issue, and happens on occasion. But generally there is a pitch to the floor, or it's sanded down to the drain so that you can let the water run smoothly. One of the finishes that we are really loving and have for some time on soapstone is that what I call a dry wax. It's a soapstone wax. It's a mixture of oil and wax that you can put on your soapstone. You don't use it very often. You don't want to build it up. You just want to use it when the soapstone either isn't beating water anymore or looks very dry. But that really has been a great boon and might help that sink draining issue.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Here's another one, just a comment. Metal fabricating shops can make customized stainless steel and copper sinks and backsplashes. So that's a good suggestion.
We use them often. We'll use them for hoods as well.
Okay. All right, I think that's it with the questions here. I have a couple more here that were sent in. Suggestion, Sue, for brightening a small kitchen that tends to be a little dark, that they cannot add windows to, or even changing wall. They cannot change walls. So it's an existing space.
So I think that's a really interesting question that I've thought a lot about over the years. I think one of the things to observe is in a kitchen that feels really dark, my observation is frequently that there are very few surfaces that are reflecting light well. So you might have a dark floor and a dark cabinet, or something that doesn't have a lot of light reflection. And I think by brightening some of those surfaces, you really do help the overall feel of the room feel brighter. I mean, if there are limited windows and limited natural light, you're going to be limited how much brighter you can make it. But I don't, your choices of cabinetry, whether it's whether you have existing cabinetry you love and they just need to get scrubbed up and re-oiled or something, or whether they need to be painted. The floors, if the floors are wood and they're sanded and then refinished, they'll have a brightness to them that a floor that hasn't had that finish happen for a while might. Some floors just are sort of beyond being finished, but painting them with a deck enamel is a great solution, and it brightens the room up immediately. Taking advantage of, again, LED lighting in a very discreet way will help give you some additional light, and making choices on your counter surfaces that add some reflection. They don't have to be light to make that happen, but they need to reflect light, if that makes sense at all.
Okay, thanks, Sue. And one last question before I do my wrap up. And again, we will stay on for an additional 15 minutes after my wrap up for those who want to stay. One more question here. Would you recommend vaulting a ceiling, or does that not fit with the style of a 1787 home?
I think that that's something to be thought about. I wouldn't just assume yes or no. I'd really want to see a space and really give that some consideration.
Okay. As you can see, Sue's not going to jump in on any decisions. There's a lot to think about, Sue.
They're too big a change.
Yeah. All right. So at this time, I'm going to do my wrap up, and I just want to offer my thanks to Sue for sharing these wonderful examples of how she uses her incredible skill in designing kitchens to fit specific lifestyles and owners' wishes, while embracing the architectural style of an existing home. We hope you've been inspired and have gained some practical design tips to help you with your kitchen projects. Thoughtful and experienced presenters like Sue and your great questions and involvement make a huge impact on advancing preservation interest and efforts across New Hampshire. We want you to know the Alliance is here to help and encourage you to check out our website at nhpreservation.org or send us an email to bt@nhpreservation.org at any time. Our next Expo session will be on July 8th at noon with Lee Schoberth from Historic New England, presenting exterior paint colors in your old house. So it's a not to be missed program if you're considering painting your house this summer. The full Expo schedule is on our website and you can register there as well. We also encourage you to share our Expo website link with other Old House and Barn enthusiasts, and be sure to check out the Expo guide of 50 products and service providers on the Expo page of the website. For those of you who have been to our in-person Expo in the past, you know how we love to give away door prizes at our event to show token of our appreciation for your participation. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Nicole Flynn, who will announce the lucky winners of today's door prizes. The first winner will receive a field guide to American houses by Virginia Savage McAllister, and the second winner will receive a gift membership to the Preservation Alliance. So Nicole, who are our lucky winners today?
The winner of the book is Lindsay Kleeken. And the winner for the gift membership is Alexis Eaton.
All right.
Nicole? Can you
Yes.
hear me? This is Lindsay, and I just want to say, this is the second time I've won a door prize, so I'd like to pass on it and let somebody else have an option.
Oh, that's so nice of you, Lindsay.
All
You
right.
better go buy a lottery ticket today.
All right, let me do another random number here and pick somebody new. Rebecca Sanborn.
Is Rebecca here?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I'm sure I'll enjoy that book.
So do you have a kitchen project you're working on, Rebecca?
We haven't started it yet, but we have one in the future, hopefully in the winter
Right.
time.
I hope
And
you got
it's
some-
probably going to be a little more simple of update than what we saw. But Sue gave us some great ideas. So thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for joining today. And thank you,
you.
Lindsay. Okay, so please watch for the follow-up email I'll be sending tomorrow with additional links, including a link to the Vintage Kitchen website and Sue's contact information. And we'll also be sending a short survey that we hope you'll fill out to help us plan for future events. And please keep the Preservation Alliance vibrant by making a donation or consider a gift membership. Thanks again to Sue for her inspiring presentation, to our Old House and Barn Expo on the Road sponsors, including lead sponsor Vintage Kitchen, for making these programs possible, and to all of you who are supporters of our critical work that helps to advance efforts to save and steward special places around New Hampshire. We wish you well and look forward to seeing you at future programs. So thank you all for joining, and for those who would like to stay on, please do so. And for others, we will have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you all.
Okay, so Sue, you can stop sharing.
I have to remember it.
There we go. Excellent. Okay. So for those who are staying on for additional 15 minutes or so, again, feel free to put some questions in the chat, comments, whatever. I'll continue with a few questions that I have. Sue, if you could touch on sort of the process, if someone's just starting to think about redoing their kitchen, what's the first step? Second, third, how do they even begin?
Sure. I think that I usually come in when people have really been giving it a whole lot of thought, and just in a very global way, they recognize that things aren't functioning, or all their appliances are dying, or there's some motivator that's starts the process. And then I really think you should think in a very expanded way initially, so that you really put out there all of your thoughts about what you want in a kitchen, how you want it to connect with your old house, what's important for you. Do you feel like there are structural needs you need to address? We put out all that, those questions, and think about it in a very large way, sort of that 30,000 square foot, 30,000 foot high kind of thinking. And then I always say that is not the time for editing, it's just the time for idea generating. So you put all those ideas out there. I think that timing can be several months. It can be a couple of months. I have some clients who come having thought about it all ahead of time. But I think that process helps me understand what the goals are for you, and establishes sort of the team that's going to work to create a new space for you. And I also think it really helps you identify the things that you value and the things you want to eliminate. So that's the first part of the process. We take all those ideas, funnel them into workable ideas, so that you might have a couple, maybe 4, maybe 6 different ideas to consider. And then you continue to weed them down and whittle them down until you have one that just feels like the most comfortable pair of shoes you could ever have. You want it to feel really comfortable. You don't want to feel like it's forced. You don't want to feel like you're abandoning your commitment to your stewardship of your old house. And usually we can find something that works really comfortably for you. Once you do that big thinking and planning, then we sort of layer on all the millions of choices that feel like they're happening. Is this going to be a wooden kitchen or a painted kitchen? Are you going to have stone counters, wood counters? If they're going to be a hard surface, are they natural material or man-made? And so we narrow down all those things. Some of the questions that came up today, like lighting and appliances, and are you someone who really just wants a very functional set of appliances, so stainless steel is the way to go? Or do you really not want the kitchen to feel so commercial? All of those things, to me, there's not a right answer. It's your identification of what the right answer for you and how it complements your home is what this whole process is about. Because the idea is to take the time. So many of the before pictures that I saw, to me, could have been averted in terms of having to remodel completely if that process had taken place. Perhaps not, but I really do think so.
Okay, thank you, Sue. How about sort of determining, this is part of that process, I think, but determining if you're redoing a kitchen that has been done multiple times, how far back you peel those layers?
Well, I think part of that depends physically. Like sometimes we go in and my husband is just doing a project right now, and there were 5 floors.
Wow.
Rather than taking anything up, people just kept adding material. So by the time we got there, you almost tripped to get into the kitchen. And it was a bit daunting to think about taking back all those layers. But what we found underneath it was a really beautiful spruce floor that they had in another part of the house as well. And
Wow.
really decided that it was okay that it wasn't pristine. But it was perfect for them. They had another plan in place. They had some great boards in the attic that they were willing to rearrange into the kitchen if they decided not to use whatever they discovered. So there was a sort of plan, an if-then plan in place, which I think helps you not panic when you're making decisions. I also feel like it's really important to know that depending on the period of time that a kitchen was renovated, it might have been done just sort of in the style of the time. So a kitchen that was from 1950 or 1960 might have more continuous counter than your old house might actually accommodate well. And by pulling that back and uncovering an old window that was covered up or something like that, it gives you an opportunity for some interesting design process. Does that answer your question?
Yep. And then one other, this is really specific, but I noticed you did this quite, bless you, quite often in some of your design. I sort of always like in my own kitchens to have my sink in front of a window so I can look outside or, have some good view from my sink. Is that sort of a concept you like to carry through with majority of your designs, or is that also case by case?
I think it's case by case, but most people like somehow to look out at something, whether they're at a window, looking straight out, or whether they're like the last job that we saw where it was on a peninsula looking across a room outside. I think some people just really like that. Some houses, though, really never had sinks like the scullery picture. The sink was on an inside wall. So I think it's more common than not, but I don't consider it that it's the rule that has to happen. I really try not to have, I have certain things that I really love to see happening, but I really love that intersection of function and aesthetic. And that's what makes them all similar but different.
So relating to function, do you go by, when they always talk about the work triangle?
I don't when I'm in a kitchen that's pre-1950.
Okay.
Not very often. It makes it, I tend to think about overlapping circles like a Venn diagram. I think it makes more sense in terms of how kitchens function. It accommodates odd placement for doors and windows, and allows you a little bit more freedom than if you feel bound to a triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have two people working in a kitchen, there might be one item that is valued by both people. So a sink or the refrigerator. And how do you place that in such a way that you don't bump into each other? Of course, unless you want to, you can bump into people because you want to, but you don't want to do that because the kitchen function is really not suitable. So, so I think that there is some credence for the triangle, but I think it was really designed for a single person kitchen personally. And I think that overlapping circles tend to be both more friendly and more amenable in an old house.
Okay. So we're getting close to 6:15. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and just go ahead and ask a question or make a comment or something, feel free to do that. Does anybody want to? No?
I'll say one last thing. I think that one of the things that people are surprised about when we first talk, when they first come into the showroom and look around and are contemplating a kitchen, I think we always advise that they take time. And I know I talked about it earlier, but I really think that that time for consideration and planning it's like the most inexpensive, unless it's really the most inexpensive thing you can do in planning your kitchen, because it gives you an opportunity to try on ideas, to think about things differently than if you feel like you have to make a decision right away. If you bump into something like a structural issue that needs to be addressed, maybe it could be addressed before other major investments happen. So no matter what you're doing, I think a kitchen is a major, both financial and emotional investment in a home. And whether it's a small renovation or a big renovation, it's just disruptive. It's the main part of your house. So before you do any of that disruption, taking the time you need to assess the functional needs that you have, assess the things you love about the space, assess about things that you really don't love about the space, taking all that time is really the most valuable starting point that I can encourage any client to do.
Excellent. So this was just so helpful, and I hope people took some really good practical tips away from this. I know I certainly have. I don't even need to redo my kitchen. We did it. And I have one funny story to say about the length of time. We did our own kitchen and it took forever, of course. And we were without a sink for, I think, 6 months because our sink finally was on a truck coming to our house, and then the truck got in an accident and the sink cracked. So we had to wait a whole nother multiple months. Anyway, we were so used to going to the bathroom to get water that when we got our new sink, we found ourselves not even using it. We kept going to the bathroom. So because we were so programmed. So it's wonderful to have these kitchen redos done quickly, but it doesn't always happen that way, especially if you're doing it yourself.
No.
So, but
it
there are
frequently
ways to
doesn't
live.
happen.
Yeah, there are ways to live in your house while you're working on your kitchen. It is doable. Not easy, but it's doable.
Yeah.
So again, thank you, Sue, so much. This has been really,
Welcome.
really wonderful. And thank you all for joining. And if you have kitchen project photos you'd like to email to us, we'd love to see them. And
Absolutely.
as I said, I'll put Sue's contact information in the email tomorrow, so you can reach out to Sue if you'd like to. So thank you all for joining, and have a good night, everybody.